Today, we've got the second gen Cyclone back in the shop because this truck and I have some unfinished business. Now, the second gen Cyclone is my LS swapped, all-wheel drive and supercharged 98 Chevy S10. And the last time you guys saw it, we were scrambling to get it done because we were going down to LS Fest in Las Vegas, where we did a little bit of drag racing. We did some autocrossing. We went to the road course. All right, that's a lap. But unfortunately, at the very last day of competition at the Speed Stop Challenge,
557 with a 7, 128 mile an hour. Gets there by 6 tenths ahead of.
we lost a transmission. Now, at the time, my plan was actually to take the second gen Cyclone on Rocky Mountain Race Week, but when the transmission blew, we did a quick game time decision. We changed plans and we rebuilt the engine and ugly truck, and we took it on race week instead, which kind of makes sense because that's kind of been more my like drag race style build, where the Cyclone is supposed to be more of a pro touring slash handling type of truck. But regardless, my goal for this truck by the end of the summer is I want to get it into the 11s also. But it's not going anywhere with a transmission that doesn't have second or fourth gear. So let's get it up in the air. Let's get the transmission yanked out and find out what went wrong.
I got to get the S10 back to the shop to do some work on it. And if you remember right, we actually blew the transmission in this truck that I'm in and driving right now. But we didn't lose all function. We still have reverse, first and third gear. We just don't have second and fourth. So it's kind of a not too bad process to drive. You just could accelerate a little bit, let off the gas, and kind of coast until it gets to about 28 miles an hour. It'll shift into third gear, and that'll take us the rest of the way to the shop. Because luckily it's, I don't know, 15 miles from the house.
We need to rebuild that transfer case too at some point. It's also straight out of the junkyard. I gotta admit, you guys, I am kind of at a weird place right now with all these projects because I'm like in a funk. I don't know what to do. It's like paralysis analysis or whatever they say. So we've got the ugly truck. We just ran a whole bunch of 11-second passes, which is good. But of course we want to go faster. And I'm kind of, you know, adding up all the things that I need to do to make it go faster, like trans brake, stronger parts on the drive line, you know, more boost, probably better transmission, things like that. But then the more I think about it, the more I'm like, wait a second, I already have another project truck that has a lot of those things, four-wheel drive drag trucks. So I'm at a weird place. Like on one hand, I want to make it go faster. I want every truck to go faster. But on the other hand, I can't really have two trucks that are both extended cab, big block, turbocharged drag trucks. It's like too much the same. I want to do something different. Now the question is, what are we actually going to do to get this thing back on the road? Because we have options. This is a 4L60 transmission. Definitely GM's like weakest LS era transmission. I mean, we can make improvements to this. That's one option. We could swap it out for a 4L80. That's another option. We could do one of those 8-speed ZF transmissions. Those are really cool. I don't know what it would take to convert it to all-wheel drive though, but that's an option. Manual transmission, that's something a lot of people have thrown around. I even thought about doing like a 6-speed auto, like a 6L80. But we have options. At the end of the day yesterday, I got the transfer case pulled out and a lot of the stuff underneath the truck is disconnected. Torque converter bolts undone, starter's out, exhaust is out of the way. But the bad part about this truck is clearances are so tight underneath. We've actually got to come up top here and do a few extra steps. The supercharger's got to come off, which actually isn't all that bad. Like we pop the belt, pop the throttle cable, and the lower manifold can stay. There's just a couple of bolts around the outside and the head unit can just come off. We don't have to get in the fuel system, don't have to get in the cooling system, don't have to touch much wiring. But when we pull the supercharger off, that's going to give us access to the top couple of bolts on the bell housing, which, like I said, this truck is kind of a pain to work on just because of how tight everything is. There is no way to get a wrench or a socket or an extension or anything from the bottom to undo those bell housing bolts like you normally would on like a Silverado. But carry on, it's actually not that bad. Simple as can be. Come on, bolt, get out of there. All right, there we go. All you got left underneath, just a couple of cooler lines, 2 bolts, and this transmission is out. Like I am very, very tempted in the next version of this build to basically cut the whole floor or the transmission tunnel and firewall area out, kind of raise it up, raise it back, just because this thing is such a pain to work on. If you guys have done a V8 S10, you know what I'm talking about. And there we have it. One junkyard transmission out of the truck. So the S10's definitely not as easy to work on compared to like a full-size Silverado, but a couple hours later we have the transmission sitting on the jack and we're ready to make our next move. Now you're probably thinking the only thing we should be doing with this 4L60 is throwing it in the trash and replacing it with a 4L80, an 8HP70, or something that's a little bit cooler and stronger and more modern perhaps. But here's the thing. I'm a curious type of person. I want to know what actually failed on this unit. Based on the symptom, I believe it's the band up front here that applies in 2nd and 4th gear. Basically what happens is whenever you make the 1-2 shift, especially under power, that servo applies, it squeezes the band, and it's supposed to stop that drum from rotating, which, you know, under full power, even with torque management, that's a lot for that band to do. And apparently it's a pretty common failure for the anchor end of the band just to break or to snap, and it will no longer be able to stop the drum, which means no 2nd or 4th gear. So I want to actually find out. We still may end up replacing this with something a little bit bigger or better, but since I've never been inside a 4L60, I've been inside plenty of 4L80s, I just want to open it up and see what we can find. So let's satisfy our curiosity. Now, I don't have one of those fancy transmission benches that you can work on that has the fluid drain and all that good stuff, but I do have one of these, which is pretty nifty because it doesn't take up a lot of space. Just kind of bolts onto the transmission like so, and then it adapts it to an engine stand so you can flip this thing all around and assemble it without getting your table all dirty. All right, here goes the mess. I don't know if you guys have ever seen those videos where there's like a transmission builder and you can tear one of these things down in like 10 minutes. I can't do that. This won't be one of those videos. But I can certainly open it up, put it back together again. That's a little dirty. Oh, broke that. Torque converter clutch solenoid. Probably should have taken that solenoid out first. There, that's dirty. Oh yeah. That is worn. If you guys have ever worked with snap rings, you know what I'm going through right now. Just get a laugh. Well, the 4L60 case is almost completely empty. The only thing left in the bottom, we have a piston and return spring. And so far, everything we've taken apart to this point is just basic standard hand tools, you know, screwdrivers, wrenches, snap ring pliers, things like that. We do, however, need one specialty tool to get this last piston out. It's just basically a spring compressor. This is a very rudimentary basic one, but just put a nut and bolt on the other side with a plate, tighten down the nut, and it'll compress those springs. We get the snap ring off, and then we can pull the spring cage out, and then the piston comes out, and then tear down is done. Then we can investigate. All right, had to end up modifying standard needle nose pliers to get that last snap ring. Tight fit, but we got it. That's the last one. Return spring. And I'm gonna get that last piston out now. There it is. Ah. Gotta love air pressure. So we got the transmission 100% disassembled. Well, I guess 98%, because the only thing I haven't done is take apart
the clutch is in these two drums here. But if you remember, my main objective for today was just to take this thing apart and figure out what went wrong, because I'm kind of curious that way, and I like taking things apart and putting them back together. Now, remember, the symptom was no second or fourth gear, which this is kind of the cause of that right here. In second and fourth, this band has to apply to this drum to stop it from rotating, which is a pretty tough task, because if you look at the surface, it's really gouged up, it's really scored. And then on this band, there's like no friction material left. And where is it? Right there. There's a rivet that's kind of worn through. But the band anchor point hasn't broken off. The servo point hasn't damaged or anything. And hydraulically, the servo's doing what it should. So basically, the cause for our symptom is just overpowering and destroying the friction surface on this drum right here. Everything else looks to be in pretty good shape so far. The sun shell, these often crack, that's fine. The clutches in the rear pack here, no major hot spots. The friction material looks good. Both sets of planetaries are still in good shape. Nothing's hurt or destroyed there. Input and output shafts, those look good. So basically, we're just looking at a new band and a new drum, and this transmission could be functional again. Now, the question is, though, what route are we going to take to get the second gen Cyclone back on the road? Because, I mean, the obvious choice is to, yeah, go ahead and get a 4L80 and swap it in. But here's the one reason why I'm a little bit hesitant to do that right now. Number one, you got to buy the transmission, you got to buy a torque converter, and then you've got to buy, in my case, an input shaft for the NV149 all-wheel drive transfer case, which add all that stuff up, it's like $3,500, maybe almost $4,000 depending, and that's a junkyard 4L80. Then if you want to rebuild it, then you're looking at even more money. And it's not that it's necessarily like a budget issue, but if you guys haven't figured it out by now, you need to know that I like doing stuff the hard way. I like trying different things, and I like doing stuff. So that's actually what we're gonna do. Now, I've got a few parts that I'm looking at that we're gonna do some key upgrades on this transmission. Of course, we're not gonna put it back together stock. That would be just crazy. But like I said, I've never rebuilt a 4L60 before. I've done a bunch of 4L80s, so I just wanna try it. This may not be the final transmission that we have in the second gen Cyclone. Later on down the road, maybe I'd really have my eye on one of those 8 HP70 swaps. I think that would be really, really cool. So maybe someday that'll go in there. But here's the other thing. The second gen Cyclone is a compact truck. Even with the supercharger, the all-wheel drive, the V8 and everything, this truck weighs like 3,900 pounds. And at least in its current configuration, it's like 600 horsepower, which we are going to turn that up. But that's definitely in the range of what a properly built 4L60 can handle. So, like I said, we're going to try it. And if you think I'm crazy and it fails, that's all right. I'll show you when it fails. But I think I've got a pretty good feeling about this. So I am going to get some parts on the way and get some of these old parts cleaned up that we're going to reuse. And next time you see the Cyclone, we're going to be building transmission for it.